This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, Citizen-made radio.
Hello and welcome to Emergence News, coming to you from Plains FM, the shining city by the sea on the plains of Canterbury in the deep south of New Zealand in that great southern ocean. The program's called Emergence News because we are discussing the emergence of the world teacher for this age. His name is Maitreya. We are a collection of volunteers, a global network who have taken it upon themselves to disseminate Maitreya's emergence and his teachings. And we also refer to a man called Benjamin Creme, who I guess you could say was the most recent oracle for the emergence of Maitreya. And we talk about Madame Blavatsky, Alice A. Bailey and Benjamin Creme as the three people who have released this story in a structured way to humanity. All right, so we're going to talk about a few things actually that we've touched on previously in the program, and we're going to look at a life as a spiritual exercise. And here in New Zealand, we have suffered in the last couple of years from extreme weather events, which we comfortably and clearly put at the feet of climate change. We discussed climate change in our last program, and I have a realisation to confess. During our last program, in which we did discuss the state of the world and specifically the fossil fuel industry's culpability in the deterioration of our climate change, or should I say climate collapse, our beloved producer Laura finished with the statement, "That was a bit grim. I thought you had a message of hope." She was right on both counts. Life on planet Earth is grim right now, and yes, we do have a message of hope. Still, I want to discuss climate change or collapse, depending on how much you know, and confirm, actually, there is some new and uplifting and possibly planet-saving ideas rising up into the public arena. And I'm going to kick off by saying hello to Peter, who's with me in the studio.
Hi there, John.
Peter, what are you going to talk about?
Well, I've got something here from Damsky's book, Inside the Spaceships. It certainly offers a ray of hope, actually, to humanity. We just need to embrace brotherhood.
Peter, I don't care what it is as long as it's good news, because we've still got Laura in the glass cage watching us. So let's hope we can tie it together with climate change and maybe wrap up with some ideas at the end. Unfortunately, Nigel's not with us, so those of you that tune in only to listen to Nigel, I'm sorry he's not here today. I will try and be as Nigel as possible. We'll come back to you in a moment. Okay, Peter, maybe we should just intro Adamski a little bit. Can you tell us about Adamski, the person, before you tick off his topic?
Yes, well, he was he lived really around Mount Palomar in California, and he noticed a lot of UFOs whizzing around there, and they've got giant telescopes up there on top there, but he had his own little telescope, and was got interested in UFOs and that sort of thing, and eventually he got a contact with these people from one of the scouts.
So a crew member from a UFO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, they've got scouts and they've got motherships and blah blah blah, all sorts of different things. But anyway, they made a contact with him, and they do it with through his intuition.
Yeah.
And he had to rely on his intuition as being correct, and he'd meet them at a particular place, and they were always there. And,
Wow.
And so he started to trust his intuition and met with them and created a great rapport with them, and eventually went on board one of their scout ships and a mothership as well.
Okay. So this ties in with the Maitreya story because on planet Earth, we live in a benign and cooperative solar system, and we all work together for the wellness of the solar system. And so what we call UFOs are merely our neighbours.
That's right.
Okay.
They're part of our solar system, and we have a bit of a laggard reputation because we're dragging the chain there.
Yeah, so we're the primitive planet. We're actually the junkyard neighbour in a very nice street called the solar system.
That's right, yes.
Okay, we're the one burning fuel, fossil fuels. We're the one with the open fire. We're the one with the nasty dog at the front door barking and the backyard full of junk cars.
That's right, and also we're the only one with dense physical bodies as well. All the rest have got etheric bodies.
Yes, and have progressed past
needing
the dense
a physical body. Yes.
All right, give us what you've got.
The environment, understanding of cause and cures. In Maitreya's Mission, Volume 3, the environment is so polluted now, we have greenhouse effect and other major problems. However, we welcome these terms with the situation. Benjamin Krem answers, the masters of the spiritual hierarchy who are coming into the world with Maitreya have technology to neutralise the greenhouse effect, the pollution of the atmosphere, even the effects of nuclear radiation. We have to wind down the fission process of creating energy. What I am not advertising, says Benjamin Krem, or even suggesting, is returning to the old days of humanity living in a pastoral situation. We will still have prosperous, well-balanced modern lifestyles with all the technology which we are capable of inventing. We should be given the blueprints of technology, which at the moment we cannot even begin to imagine. It would boggle the mind of the most advanced scientists. We need to accept the principle of sharing, and when this is actually working out in the world, this gift of technology can be given to us. So, from this article, Inside the Spaceships, which George Adamski wrote, he's invited aboard a scout ship and a mothership to converse with the crew members and is shown life on Venus, which is on the etheric planes of matter, visible only to those with etheric vision. According to the ageless wisdom teachings, the conversations with a Venusian master on one of these trips are particularly inspiring. You men of Earth continually invite disaster by creating combinations which oppose each other rather than working together. A bondage that is the result of centuries of accumulated misunderstandings, divisions, and personal desire for power is difficult to break. It can only come to pass when enough people realise what they are, souls in incarnation, and are willing to work together and wholeheartedly for a better world by giving up their personal greed and the desires for exaltation one above the other. We of the other worlds have no such divisions, but realise the relationship and interdependence of all things. The Venusian master describes human beings as an external manifestation in a universe as vast as eternity. Those who have learned this truth live in a constant present, for it is always the present. People on Venus must dress and do many things in a similar way to us, but the difference clearly lies in their understandings of their true nature, of who they are. Since we have learned that life on it is all-inclusive, and we are one, that life we know, we can hurt nothing but hurting ourselves. There is a natural law of balance in which we abide, very unlike our delusional aim for constant economic growth, pretending that we are not part of the ecosystem that we are destroying. Adamski was shown several cities on the planet Venus, some large and some small. The streets were well laid out, beautifully bordered with flowers in many colours, They all gave him the feeling of having been transported to some wonderful fairyland. He describes cities following a circular or oval pattern, not in any way congested, beautiful structures with no monotonous lines, and some with domes that seem to emit revitalizing forces in prismatic colours. At night the colours cease and the domes become luminous with a soft yellowish light. The people on the streets seem to be going about their business in a similar way as on earth, except for the absence of rush and worry so noticeable with us. Although we on earth have a limited understanding of life, the composition of the universe, other worlds and ourselves, many people are showing a growing and sincere desire for a greater understanding. The Venusian master, the purpose of life on other worlds is basically the same as yours. Inherent in all mankind, however deeply buried it might be, is the yearning to rise to something higher. We who have travelled the path you are now treading are willing to help and give our knowledge to all who will accept it. With greater understanding of our own spiritual nature and place in the greater scheme of things comes a greater ability to harness the laws of nature. Although advanced civilizations use very advanced technology, it is never dominantly present. In itself, it is not a priority. But living in harmony with nature is, because they don't see themselves as separate from nature. We've often talked about this, John, haven't we? That we're part of nature.
Not dominant.
Yes.
We're not here to own and dominate nature. We're actually part of nature.
That's right, exactly. Yes. So,
we're part of the organism that we call planet Earth.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So when it comes to the technology they use for space travel, the suspension of gravity and drawing energy from the ether, the Venusian master said, "We would gladly give you this knowledge, except that you have not yet learn to live with one another in peace and brotherhood, for the welfare of all men alike, as we have on other worlds. And indeed the powers that be might weaponize spaceships and want to take possession of other worlds. However, the notion that help and knowledge is available in abundance, once we take the first critical steps to put our house in order, once we have reached a degree of harmlessness, is reassuring."
Fabulous. We'll take a break, Peter, and come back.
Thank you, John. This is the Emergence News on Plains FM. For more information, go to shareinternational.org.
Hey, Peter, that was great stuff. And interestingly enough, that the occupants of the spaceship are talking about similar stuff to Maitreya, talking about interdependence, talking about discovering our true nature, talking about there is another way to run this planet, talking about the goal is to understand life. So, as I said earlier, we've had some very destructive climate change-driven events happening in New Zealand in the last number of years. And most recently, we had a cyclone through here called Cyclone Gabriel, which did unbelievable amounts of damage. So the question is now being asked in Clean Green New Zealand, are we actually clean and green? And the answer is quite clearly we're not. So the stuff you've talked about, Peter, to me is the next level of our existence. I've pulled out an article, actually off Stuff of all places, and it is called "As the Climate Crisis Deepens, Is Degrowth the Only Pathway Out?" So I'll flick through some of the ideas that that article presents, and basically it touches that idea of we need to manage the planet differently as a race, as one people, which also encapsulates a whole lot of ideas that Maitreya's had. Anyway, this I picked this article up March of this year. It's written by Dr. Catherine Knight, and her byline is, "As the climate crisis deepens, is degrowth the only pathway out?" She's an award-winning writer, policy practitioner, published several books. She's an honorary research associate at the School of People, Environment and Planning at Massey University. This is her business. So this opinion piece, and she starts with, "As the climate crisis deepens with devastating effect here in our own communities, many people are starting to question the system that created this crisis in the first place. Sure, we can build back better, and that's like this ugly catchphrase that's doing the rounds globally. Sure, we can build back better with more roads, bridges, stormwater and stop banks, and I cannot imagine a seawall that'll encompass Auckland, our biggest city in the narrowest part and shallowest part of the country. Not the smartest thing we've ever done. Anyway, but at least this will buy us a little bit of time, says Dr. Catherine Knight, before the next catastrophic weather event strikes. And I'm reminded of the story of King Canute. It's almost as though city councils and governments around New Zealand believe they can hold back the water. And clearly we can't. So I think we're going to have a structured retreat from places like Auckland and from a lot of our coastal places here in New Zealand. Anyway, she goes on to say climate change is already bedded in, and I think that's a powerful term. But we still have a chance of preserving a livable planet for our children and their children. However, to do this, we must stop causing the harm that causes climate and ecological breakdown. Renewable energy and new technology will help in our transition to a lower impact economy, which is exactly what Benjamin Creme was saying in your prelude. But we must also, says Dr. Catherine Knight, drastically reduce the energy and resources we use and waste. The idea of reducing the throughput of energy and material flows in our economy while focusing instead on well-being is known by many names. Well-being economy, steady-state economy, donut economics. But she's saying the term that really strikes home is this idea of degrowth. And in spite of the name, degrowth advocates do not suggest the carte blanche reduction of economic activity. And this is the key to it, and I think this is where her ideas are really clever. She goes on to say they propose the downscaling of parts of the economy that do little to contribute to human well-being while causing enormous harm to the environment. And she tells us that examples are such sectors as industrialised meat and dairy production, fast fashion, which I think may be the number 2 dirtiest industry on the planet. She talks about advertising, cars, SUVs and aviation. So for me, when I think about this, it's the difference between what we need and what we want. And this is a discussion we must have. We need to understand need versus want. And our needs, and Maitreya has spoken of this many times, our needs are right housing, right education, right food, right healthcare. So Dr. Knight goes on to say, advocates argue for the need to lengthen the lifespan of products by phasing out single-use products and by banning, and I love this term, the designed-in obsolescence of electronic and household appliances. And I think she's hinting at there's a deliberate policy there by manufacturers.
No, of course.
And I guess there's no point shaving me a shaver for 60 years if you're trying to make money, right?
No.
Okay. On the other hand, Dr. Knight says they also propose the expansion of sectors of the economy that will support our transition to an economy that operates within planetary boundaries. Such sectors include renewable energy generation, public transport, social housing, health and healthcare sectors, education, green infrastructure, and sustainable food production. So she's touching on those 4 priorities of Maitreya. Degrowth, she goes on to say, advocates argue that whether we like it or not, we will get to the point, and it may be sooner than we realise, where current growth rates are no longer viable and our existing economic system will collapse. And as we know, that is when Maitreya will come forward.
That's right, yeah.
And I've just been reading some articles on Credit Suisse and the awful problems that's having as a major global financial institution. And I've just been reading that the Silicon Valley Bank in the US has collapsed. Now, that's a regional bank and probably not so much of a global reach, but Credit Suisse is a global financial institution. So Dr. Knight tells us, rather than chaotic collapse leading to unimaginable human suffering and social disruption, she's saying a planned transition to a post-growth economy, in which the economic system is redesigned to put human and planetary well-being at the centre, rather than unevenly distributed wealth creation. And for all my capitalists out there that are now jumping up and down, Dr. Knight reminds us, and there's a link in her article, nearly 2/3 of all new wealth created globally in the last 2 years went to the richest 1%. So no, capitalism is not making us richer. It's making some people exceptionally rich, and the rest of us are struggling. She goes on to say there'd be more rational and efficient economy because it would be centred around producing goods and services that we actually need, not ones that we are persuaded we need through all persuasive advertising. And once again, that brings me back to that need versus want. Advertising tells us what we want, and it glosses over what we need. Degrowth proponents acknowledge that the downscaling of significant parts of the economy will mean less paid work for those working in sunset industries. Benjamin Creme has talked about this. Dr. Knight says that we need to look at universal basic income, which was doing the rounds, I guess, Peter, 5 years ago. We talked about it back on this program. Dr. Knight talks about publicly funded retraining schemes and a 4-day week to address this. Now, the 4-day week's been researched in Greenland recently and was a phenomenal success. Productivity, health and engagement of the workforce went up when they were offered a 4-day week. Dr. Knight tells us that advocates of degrowth propose downscaling those parts of the economy that do little to contribute to well-being, human well-being, while causing enormous harm to the environment. And she highlights particularly the aviation industry. These and other policies would enable more people to contribute to society in ways that are not rewarded by direct income, including caregiving, environmental restoration, or work that contributes in other ways to social or community well-being. And if we're able to get away from this profit-generating model, then our costs drop phenomenally, and then a universal basic income, and then some commitment to our society engages people in a healthy way. I think she's got some fabulous ideas. She talks about redesigning the economy. She criticises the myth of trickle-down economics because she knows that the bulk of the wealth currently goes back into the pockets of very few. She also says that this obscenely profitable fossil fuel industry once again supports corrupt governments and supports corrupt commercial endeavour. Under our current economic system, Dr. Knight tells us, the cost of harmful industries fall on the government and on the taxpayer. So we've had a couple of examples where in the United States they're discovering oil wells that are no longer viable, but the company that digs them liquidates themselves and walks away, leaving the leaking oil well. We've discovered that with gas wells that are no longer commercially viable, the company involved liquidates itself and walks away from them. So that then falls on the taxpayer to clean up this mess. The same is happening with the nuclear energy industry right across Europe and in the States where the byproduct of those industries are left to the taxpayer to clean up. She does say, though, there is good news. Not only would a redesign of our economy be better for the planet, but it would be better for us as human beings. So by putting the well-being of humanity at the centre of the economic system, we provide conditions for a more equitable and healthy society where people have more time and energy to do the things that bring joy, nourish well-being, and restore the connection with place and community. So when we look at it in a spiritual way, Peter, she is criticising materialism.
That's right. It's about bringing brotherhood and humanity back together.
Yes. She actually mentions the forestry business in New Zealand, which the slash or the waste from the forestry division industry has been carried down the rivers and has done phenomenal damage. She finishes with, as the climate crisis really begins to bite, we need to set an ideology aside and have a mature, evidence-based discussion around this future of our economy and our society. She believes New Zealand can lead the way. And I'm hoping that is good news for people. So yes, we're in a mess, and yes, there are ways out of it.
Indeed.
Thank you. All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org, and also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.